My name is Cody Kraus, and on this show, I bring on guests to talk about everything real estate. Let's go. Hey everybody, welcome to the show this week. Today I have my friend and fellow realtor, Abe Hiebert, on with me. Abe and I have known each other since grade 2.
Probably
maybe? Something like that.
3, something like that, yeah.
So we've known each other for a long time. We've worked together now for the last 3 years almost.
Yep, just about 3 years.
And today we want to talk about something that is unfortunate. However, it's topical. It's what's happening in Ontario right now in the world of home ownership, especially for landlords. So I'm going to introduce a bit of an idea of what the topic is, but first I want to hear, who is Abe?
So my name is Abe Hiebert, obviously. I'm a second generation Canadian. My parents came here in the, what would have been the 80s, in the late 80s. They immigrated from Mexico, and real estate has always been something that I've been passionate about. I currently own 2 residential rental properties. They're both single family dwellings. I also partner in a small scale greenhouse operation, and then I sell real estate. That's Abe in a nutshell.
So loves real estate. And I mean, a big part of the reason that you're doing this, investing in farms, investing in rentals, is the whole idea of generational wealth. You got 3 children that you want to take care of. And I mean, pretty cool what your parents did. They came to this country. Did they speak English when they came over?
Literally did not speak English. My dad told me stories of when he first came to Canada, walking from door to door with a cardboard sign, looking for work. This is what I can do. And he's literally did not know what type of response to give if somebody offered him work.
So couldn't read or write, I would imagine, either.
Totally green, fresh to the country. And you know what? Worked his ass off and built up a nice family unit and a little bit of a nest egg.
I'm saying I'm lucky to know your dad, and I know your dad has rental property.
He does.
Which is cool.
Yeah.
So came to this country in the 80s, not that long ago. Couldn't speak English, but he understood the concept of buying property, getting more properties than just the one that you live in.
Absolutely.
And I mean, big family. You guys have there's 9 of you.
Yeah, I was 7 of 9. I was number 7 of 9.
So that's not a small family to commit to feeding and housing, right? There's a lot of you under one roof. So it's pretty cool what your parents have done in a course of just over 4 decades.
Yeah.
And obviously that's a lot of the inspiration for Abe being in real estate and investing in real estate moving forward too, is you got children, you want to provide for them.
Absolutely.
So unfortunately, the topic we want to talk about today is the Landlord Tenant Board in Ontario, and why it's probably the death of mom and pop landlords in Ontario. So, I mean, owning rental property is something that you and I are advocates for. I've learned that from my parents. You've learned that from your parents. We've seen a lot of clients do well with it. Why is it looking less and less of a stronger case right now to own rentals in Ontario?
Well, there's something new that's come out in the last couple of years that we haven't seen before, and they're professional tenants. They are literally people that come rent a home, have no intention of ever paying rent or ever
after their first and last.
Yeah, they pay first and last month rent, and that's it. And they start with the judicial process almost immediately. They know that the system is backlogged. We're 8 to 12 months out right now from a hearing, and then a few months after that for an actual decision. So it's a process to get an inadequate tenant out. That being said, there are plenty of tenants that are fantastic to deal with, and I've been blessed to have those in my rental properties. I do think it's still lucrative, and it's still worthwhile to invest in real estate. And as a long-term tenant, it's not what it used to be.
Yeah, I'm a sucker for a good sob story. So I always want to see the best in people. And like you said, I've had some great tenants too. I would say that 80-90% of my tenants are awesome people, and I can have a great conversation with them, and I appreciate them, and it's positive. And then there's the 5 or 10% that take advantage of what they can take advantage of. And I think honestly, if you could give it like a turning point, it was probably COVID.
Yeah.
Right. If you live in Ontario, Doug Ford came out at one point and said there's going to be no evictions during COVID. And we had a lot of tenants take that as, I don't have to pay rent anymore. And unfortunately, it kind of, and it doesn't mean that, you wouldn't start the application and things like that, just that they weren't going to issue any evictions during COVID. But that's not what the general public heard.
No.
Maybe it's not exactly what he said, but they heard no evictions during COVID, and COVID lasted 2 years. And so once they started operating again and said, okay, no, we can't have all our landlords not getting rent because they still have families to feed and things. I think a lot of people think if you own a rental house, you don't have a mortgage on it. Meanwhile, just about every landlord I know has mortgages on their rentals. They may not on their primary. Most of us do. But they may not, but there's money owed every month on that rental.
And
property tax, insurance. If it's condo, you got condo fees. But the big one is servicing the debt on it. And if the rent's not coming in, how many months can a landlord make it?
And the market is in such a way right now that most rental properties are leveraged to the point where they almost don't make sense, or a lot of them don't make sense anymore.
Yeah. So there is, I was listening to a podcast a couple weeks ago anyways, and one of the guys said on there, you know what, it's odd that Canada's trying to be like anti-landlord, but if you look at a lot of the landlords in the big cities right now, they're in negative cash flow scenarios. So they're renting condos for $2,200 or $2,500 a month, and it might cost them $3,000 a month at the current interest rates. If you get rid of all these landlords,
just to own it,
these landlords are actually subsidizing those people's living expenses right now, even if they're paying. And if they don't pay, then it's really a crappy scenario, right?
Oh, it absolutely is.
But so anyways, during COVID, we saw no new evictions, and then they were like, oh, no, we can't just have that go indefinitely. So they started to address the backlog of the applications from landlords that wanted to get rid of tenants. And there's two sides to that. It's called the Landlord Tenant Board. It's not just for landlords. There's tenants that make inquiries against their landlord, whether it's from non-maintenance or abuse or a whole host of other things. So it was equally landlords and tenants that were being affected by the Landlord Tenant Board not making decisions. So now there's a backlog. And I mean, it got to the point where I personally had some tenants. There was a property that myself and a number of other guys owned together. So it wasn't crazy like it was breaking our household because we were shouldering the negative carry as I think 6 guys together. If it was just me, it would have broke our family and our household because I didn't see rent from this one rental for 16 months by the time we actually got an eviction ordered. And every time we met with the LTB, yeah, I'm going to pay rent, whatever. The thing is with the LTB, they only make a window for so many hearings. And if you don't get heard during that, because the first 3 or 4 took so long, then they reschedule for the next one. We actually got to the point where our adjudicator left and quit his job, never addressed our issue after the hearing, and then they had to reschedule another hearing. Anyways, 16 months is the process that it took, not getting rent coming in. And we had another one too, like cash for keys was a pretty common scenario. The rents in Ontario went up they went up a little bit, but the prices of homes went up like crazy. So you had a lot of landlords that were ready to get out. I was okay continuing to own this property. However, it was being abused. There was illegal activity in the property. The house got trashed. And so anyways, we're not in the business of making people homeless. We're realtors and landlords. We enjoy giving people a great home to live in. But I said that we can't continue this relationship anymore. It's not healthy. And I'm not okay with illegal activity happening in my property. So I made her a deal to leave the property, and I'll give you X number of dollars if you agree to move out. We shook hands and everything's good. Her concern was that she wouldn't have enough money to pay first and last on another rental. So I even said, no problem. I'll give you first and last up front on your next rental so that you can make it into the next one okay. And then once you move out, I'll give you the rest of the money. Unfortunately, she didn't find another place to go to. And she was still there after I paid her a sum of money, and I had to file an application to evict this tenant after that. And that took another 7 months. So I was out the money that I paid ahead of time because of the N11, because I thought I was being a nice guy. And unfortunately, still didn't see an empty house until 7 months after that. And let me tell you, if they were wrecking it before, it got really wrecked during that next 7-month period. And it's unfortunate, but it's put a bit of a bad taste in my mouth as a landlord in Ontario, because you go south to the States, there's a lot of rules where, no, you bring in a dog, you're going to pay more money each month for that dog. Our lease was for this number of people. Now you have this number of people living here. Like, there's people living in the house that I didn't even sign the lease with, right? Like, now it's getting abused. If you cause damage to it, we can't withhold anything back as the landlord. You get first and last, and that's it. Otherwise, good luck.
Yeah. And it doesn't matter who's on the lease. If they're technically residing in the home, they've got basically tenant rights.
Yeah.
Yeah,
they have more rights. It's basically law of possession, right?
exactly.
If you're living in the house, you have the most of the rights. So we are seeing a lot of mom and pop landlords get out of real estate investing, and I don't think the government of Ontario is doing this on purpose, like running the LTB terribly. I think it's underfunded and
Wait. A government program is not being run properly?
the LTB is not being run properly. They're actually being investigated by the ombudsman. They're not really accountable to a whole lot of people. And they let this backlog happen. All of a sudden, work from home, Zoom this, Zoom that.
Yep.
And there was a huge backlog. And to be fair, they are working through it. Like I said, my worst during the height of COVID eviction was 16 months. Unfortunately, I have someone who's delinquent on their rent right now. And I think it was about 6 months to get a date scheduled. And that doesn't mean we'll get the eviction in 6 months, but it might be 8 or 10. It's better than 16, but it's still terrible. So on that note, I think it's going to push a lot of mom and pop landlords out of the business because they're just going, man, if I only have one rental,
well, when
6, 12, 18 months without rent, that's going to break your household. Maybe not by design. And I'll let you say what you're going to say in just 1 second, but maybe not by design. I think what's going to happen now is most of the landlords in Ontario are going to be REITs, real estate investment trusts, because they know the system. They have lawyers and paralegals on staff. And frankly, if there's no mom and pop landlords, the landlord tenant board doesn't have to deal with 10,000 people across Ontario that own 1 or 2 rentals that don't know the ins and outs of how lease contracts work. If they're just dealing with 20 large corporations that own huge amounts of rentals, maybe you're just booking Zoom calls with that corporation. And frankly, these professional tenants might disappear when there's only 20 landlords in the whole province as opposed to 10,000, right?
Well, exactly. If you've got a bad name with these landlords, then where are you going to go?
Yeah, sorry, you were going to make a point. And I cut you off.
My point earlier was just, so 10 years ago, maybe even more than that, 10, 20 years ago, when I first bought my rental property, it was 2011, so 13 years ago. And I kind of got into it on accident. I wanted somewhere to park my money. I was young. I had some cash saved up. I was working full time and I didn't have a lot of expenses. So my dad, being the person he is, he's like, buy a property. Even if it doesn't make you money right now or make a lot of money, at least you have somewhere to park your cash. It appreciates. Tenants are going to pay down your rent. And you have something that you're working for instead of, the typical things that a 20-year-old male does with his spare time.
How big of a boat can I buy? Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. So, and that's how I tell myself I accidentally got into the industry. And both of my rental properties currently, they don't cash flow a ton of money. They take care of themselves. I've got young families in both of them, and I've built a personal relationship with these tenants, and that is the only way I can see that it working for me. I'm not a professional landlord. I don't want to have 100 doors because I don't want the headaches of every single tenant and all their issues. And I know you can hire management companies and everything else, but once you start splitting everything,
you have to factor that into your cash flow too.
Exactly. Right? There's not a ton of cash flow there. They manage themselves. They work. But it's not a get-rich-quick scheme. It's a very much get-rich-slow scheme, if not, maybe not even get rich, but, have something that when my children are in their early 30s or late 20s and they want to move into the market, then at least I have the capability to do something to help them.
Yeah, I've told a lot of our clients, okay, so you guys bought a home. That's great. How many kids do you have? Yeah. You got 3 kids. You should probably buy 3 rentals now. And not because I think they're the best investment in the world, but you hear a lot of parents saying, my kids are never going to own a home.
I hear
maybe if you keep saying that, you might speak it into existence. But there's something that we can do as responsible parents to put money aside. And is there other things you could do? RESPs or whatever? Sure.
100%.
I mean, I like stocks. I've done okay with them when I let someone else manage them. When Cody does his own thing, they don't do as well. Yeah. But that being said, I've always looked at stocks and go, okay, well, there's only 2 ways you can get paid from stocks. Dividend, maybe, and appreciation. So you get paid when you sell. If it doesn't have a dividend, if it has a dividend, you can get paid on the quarterly performance of it. But World War III comes around or another pandemic or whatever, you need a place to live. You need somewhere to sleep. You can't eat Apple stock. You can't
Nope.
eat Tesla stock, right? And so we've always told our clients with real estate, you get paid three ways, right? So stocks, potentially dividend, capital appreciation. Houses, dividend would be your monthly cash flow.
Yep.
And then obviously appreciation, the value of the house goes up. But there's a third investment principle that comes into with real estate when it's leveraged. And what's that one?
Principal pay down.
Principal pay down. So we got we have our tenants in the house. Every month they make rent. Say it's $2,500 a month, and we have $2,000 of that covering expenses and interest payments. Even if we're not cash flowing $500, we might be getting $500 of principal pay down coming every month, and that's the get rich slow but get rich program, right?
And I don't even know if it's so much a get rich. It's just create a little bit of financial independence from the rat race.
Yep, definitely.
Yep.
So we kind of talked about REITs and how they're probably going to be the biggest landlords, and they might already be in Ontario.
Probably.
I think there's less and less people getting into real estate investing, especially single family homes right now with, I mean, we had very low interest rates for 20 years. They're not even that high now considered to what historically they have been. However, the prices of the homes are a lot more money, and sure, rent's more money too, but it's not quite proportionally the same.
The math doesn't math.
No. And I mean, what we see CMHC doing is they have that MLI select program for the big time developers, and they're financing 95% of a build and they're amortizing it over 50 years.
Yep.
You and I can't get that.
Nope.
Right? Unless we all of a sudden stumble across land that allows for this zoning wise. It's got enough servicing and sanitary, clean water, gas, hydro, whatever. And we bring a builder on to sign on to it and say, yeah, I'll back Abe, I'll back Cody, and this is going to work. And I have a performance history of doing it with other
still have to fight the municipality on it.
for years. I'm sure they do. So that's kind of what I see happening to the landscape of rentals in Ontario is I think slowly, maybe over the next 15 years, I would say that probably 99% of single family homes are going to be owner occupied.
Probably.
You might still have some people that had a paid for rental and they kept it for a while, but like it's getting to the point now where the single family home is coveted. It's wanted by a family for a primary residence. So, those homes that might have been on looked down neighborhoods before, maybe not the best neighborhoods in town, families are like, no, we want a home to live in. If it's not the greatest neighborhood, that's okay. We can put up a fence and do interior renos to make it home for us.
Yeah.
And you see a lot of these older neighborhoods actually transitioning to primary residences right now. And all of a sudden the lawns are getting taken care of, and they're improving the gardens, and they're painting the inside and the outside, and they're changing the roofs and the siding. And so a lot of these older neighborhoods that were primarily rental neighborhoods before, I am seeing a lot more owner occupants move into those, and it's bringing the whole neighborhood up a little bit.
Absolutely. We've seen that like crazy. And especially in the Leamington area, a lot of the older neighborhoods have become much more owner occupied, and the values have definitely benefited from it. Yeah.
And we're seeing too a number of older homes getting pushed over for new homes getting built too. So I guess kind of on the note of decrease in mom and pop landlords, we're seeing mom and pop go, well, this was a $200,000 home. Now it's a $400,000 home.
Yep.
My rent was $1,500. Now it's $2,000. Doesn't really make sense for me to keep it with those numbers. I'll sell the house. A family can enjoy it and use it as a primary residence. But that mom and pop landlord isn't going to the real estate market now and building a large rental portfolio. However, they could put it into REITs if they wanted to. They could go to the stock market.
A lot of that money is going into REITs. So I know there's quite a few landlords that have sold off residential rental properties, and they opted for a REIT where they get a fair return and a lot less headaches, and it's a lot more passive.
And dividends.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. So it's tough to say. Like I like the idea of owning rentals, and I found like with condos, for example, I get a lot of retirees where they sold their home. They're cash rich. No, not super wealthy, but it can, if they put the money into a good investment, it can kind of offset the cost of rent. They're typically low maintenance. You're not getting a lot of issues and headaches. There's no dog breeding or or multiple tenants moving in that didn't sign the lease or things like that. However, you might get called to change a light bulb or small plumbing issue, whatever. But there's not a lot of cash flow there typically with a condo either, depending on how long you've owned it for. Yeah, I guess I don't know how much more to add to it than that, other than I see a trend of mom and pop landlords selling because the prices are high.
Yep.
They're not seeing a lot of laws in favor of the landlords right now. And the REITs are like, okay, no problem. We're getting 50-year loans, or it doesn't even have to be a REIT. It could be a large private corporation. We'll get that 50-year loan. We'll put a full-time property manager in, and we're going to be really, I guess they're going to be scrutinous about who the tenant is. Credit application, and almost like a resume.
Exactly. They don't discriminate because they don't look at the human being. They look at the numbers on the paper. That's it.
Numbers don't lie.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, okay, so there's some other ways that you could be a landlord living in Ontario. That could be, maybe we don't deal with long-term tenants. Maybe we go the short-term, the Airbnb route.
Yeah.
Maybe we look at commercial or industrial. Maybe we look at agricultural. Or maybe we look at another country or another province. What are you seeing happening in that right now? So people that said, I don't really want to be a landlord in Ontario anymore.
We're seeing a lot of people move towards the Florida and the Texas markets right now. They're going down south. They're going across the border. The numbers work better out there. The restrictions are less.
No state income taxes.
No state income taxes, exactly.
Landlord friendly laws.
We did see a lot of Airbnb activity in the last 2 years. That has since died down quite a bit. Big issue with the Airbnbs is municipalities are starting to get involved, and they want to regulate that further and further.
They were hot, right? When Ontario started saying, okay, it's COVID, we want you guys to travel inside Ontario. They were actually given a tax credit for you to travel inside the province.
Yeah.
Great for Airbnb landlords. However, we're learning now that they can create some HST implications where you're taking what was existing residential inventory and now using it as a commercial property. If people are traveling less in Ontario, you're going to have more vacancies sitting there. If you had a variable rate mortgage or a mortgage that's coming up for renewal, all of a sudden your payments could have gone from maybe on a 2% loan, say they're around $2,000 a month, to 5.5% loan, you might be
$3,500.
$3,200, $3,500 a month. So it can change your cash flow scenario.
Absolutely. And the issue with the Airbnbs is it's not as predictable as the long-term rental market either.
No, it's definitely not. Yeah. Okay. So what about other asset classes? What about agricultural?
Agricultural and commercial have always been in demand. Agricultural is definitely difficult to get into. It's
big barrier to entry.
Big barrier to entry. And commercial is the same thing. You're talking a lot higher upfront capital expenses, but you do see better returns and more manageable tenants on the commercial side of things. And especially if we're dealing with commercial tenancy, then we're not dealing with the landlord tenant board. And then the
landlords have a lot more rights with commercial.
The commercial landlords do have a lot more rights with the properties.
Yeah. So what I'm seeing in agricultural right now is always negative cash flow. I don't think there's any farm that makes money right now, unless there's a rental warehouse or a couple rental houses on it that can help it, but they're still usually negative or break even. On the commercial side of it, I'm seeing some interesting opportunity right there, because
absolutely,
maybe it's because we're based out of a small town. Like in the big cities right now, you're seeing the REITs and the large commercial investing corporations or private equity firms. They're buying the really nice A+ neighborhood, like the blockbuster buildings. But it's still a lot of owner occupants or mom and pop landlords that are owning the small plazas that might be a little bit dated, or the isolated pizza joint, or the small strip plaza, or whatever. Now, a lot of times these have been owned for like 3-4 decades by the same landlord, and we're seeing some people get into those with vendor take-back loans.
Absolutely. Vendor take-back's a fantastic way for a young investor to actually get into the market.
Yeah. And I guess for people that are unfamiliar with that, so the vendor take-back loan is going to a seller with a very high proportion of equity, or 100%. They don't owe any money on the property. And say I'm a potential buyer, I come to them and say, well, I'd love to buy your building. I don't have a large commercial portfolio, or I may have one. But obviously you want top dollar for your real estate, but you probably also want your capital gains spread over multiple years. And we have new capital gains laws in Canada now, in Ontario, that are quite a bit higher. So that can be appealing if we can, maybe I agree to pay the landlords 1.5 million, even if I only think the building might be worth 1.3. But instead of me going to the bank and getting a 6.5% commercial loan with 35% down, maybe I can talk to the landlord and say, well, would you sell it to me with 20% down on closing, hold the loan at maybe 3% or 4% interest only, even for 3 to 5 years. And that way the landlord can spread their capital gains over 3 or 5 years instead of just over one.
Exactly. No, that's something that's becoming more and more popular especially in the agricultural. We see a lot of old retired farmers they own their farm outright, and the second generation either doesn't want to take it over or doesn't have the ability to, and they're like, okay, well, we need to sell the farm. We don't owe anything on it. Not a whole lot of young farmers getting into the industry, just because of that barrier to entry. A typical bank wants to see a 25% equity stake on it, just about anything they lend on. So you go to the old farmer, you work, even I've seen it, guys have worked for the farmer for a year or two, made a deal to buy the farm off of him, given him a substantial amount of cash or equity up front, and then from there they do a combination of a vendor take back with some bank financing, and it's a really good way for the existing landlord or owner to defer capital gains taxes and spread some of those expenses over multiple years.
Yeah, it makes sense. So don't want to be total doom and gloom. There is still ways that we can have a positive experience as a landlord
Absolutely.
in Ontario. And sometimes that's going to Alberta instead of Ontario. Sometimes that's going south, like you mentioned, Texas, Florida. But I mean, let's end this on a more positive note. Has being a landlord overall still been a positive
I wouldn't
enhancement to your life?
I wouldn't change it. I wouldn't change it for anything. But at the end of the day, make sure there's good and there's bad deals out there, and a good investor will take a bad deal and make it good. A bad investor will take a good deal and make it bad.
Yeah.
So
there's always
work with a professional. Make sure that you're protected, and know your numbers. Those are the big things.
And what we mentioned, like, numbers don't lie. So I got a little bit blinded during COVID. Prices were going up like crazy. Yep. So it was almost like a scarcity mindset. Like, we just need to buy something because everything goes up in value. So I started ignoring my numbers during COVID, and I bought a couple properties where I was like, hey, I'm going to buy this one and tear it down and build this. And when I looked at all the numbers, it wasn't cash flow positive.
Right.
But I still bought it just out of a scarcity mentality. And then I ended up selling it because the interest rates were going up, and then it looked really bad. So if the deal looked bad with low interest rates, it looked really bad with high interest rates.
Exactly.
So I ended up selling it and taking a bath. But if I had just stuck to the principles from the start, which is Robert Kiyosaki, right? Rich Dad, Poor Dad. Yeah. How many properties can you afford to own that are negative $100 per month cash flow? And the answer is, well, divide your income by $100. Your after-tax income,
exactly.
Right? And flip that question around. How many properties can you afford to own that are positive $100 a month cash flow? As many as you can come up with the down payment for.
Exactly.
Right? And so anyways, during COVID, I started ignoring those basic principles, and it put me into a tough spot. But like you said, know your numbers. If you have numbers and they work, and you plan for the worst case scenario, and you plan for higher interest rates or higher vacancy or bad debts from tenants or whatever. And also, we live in Ontario. We know that there's rent control.
Absolutely.
Currently, it's 2.5% is the annual amount you can raise rents. And it was 0 at one point, I think, during 2020. I don't ever expect it to be 5 or 9 or 10%.
No, it'll never keep up with the real inflation numbers, but...
No. So anyways, we're going to call this episode essentially the end of mom and pop landlords in Ontario. And I want to thank Abe Hiebert for joining me on the show today. And I hope that you guys appreciated the conversation.
Absolutely. Thank you, guys.
Bye. Thanks for listening to the show, folks. Please keep in mind that this show is not offering legal, financial, or accounting advice, but rather opinions and experiences in the world of real estate from the host and the guests. If you're enjoying the show, please rate, review, and share with your friends and colleagues. And if you think that there's someone that needs to be on this show, please feel free to connect them with me. Or if there's a topic that should be discussed, feel free to let me know. Thank you so much, and bye for now.